And now I'm going to introduce our first speaker for today, and that is Gillian Martin. So Gillian Martin is the SNP's member of Scottish Parliament for Aberdeenshire East. She's a member of the Economy, Jobs and Fair Work Committee and a member of the Education and Skills Committee. So welcome, Gillian.
Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be asked to be the first person to speak in your webinar. This is what Parliament Project's doing is so close to my heart, it's unbelievable. I'm a woman who is 49 and only entered politics when she was, what would have been 48. So I'm somebody that's come into politics through a very circuitous route of having done lots of other things first. It's certainly worked for me. I think it's made a difference to the type of politician I am, I think. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got in, first of all. So I was one of these people who's been very politically minded their entire life, very opinionated, likes to have lots of discussions with everyone, but never really involved in actual official party politics. Knew who I supported, was a supporter, always voted the same way, always had my particular ideas about how I felt about politics in Scotland, but came from a very political family. My father and my mother had been in the party that I've joined ever since before I was born. But I think actually that meant I like to have arguments with my mum and dad over the dinner table about things. So I never actually went the route of actually joining the party until fairly recently. And what got me into actual politics with a capital P was becoming involved in the Scottish independence referendum. And I joined a group called Women for Independence because I felt very strongly that women's voices really weren't getting out there. And that's despite the fact that you had quite high-level women in all the political parties involved. But I felt on a local level, particularly, there was an awful lot of town hall events and debates and things happening, and it was always men at the top table. And it was actually Women for Independence contacted me because they knew that I was a member of their organisation, a supporter of their organisation. And I had a blog at the time, which used to be all about my kids and daft things that they had done, but more and more had become more and more political. So they got in touch with me and said, do you want to represent us at a couple of debates that there are up your way? Just so that we have a bit of gender balance and we have some representation. And that's how I got involved. So you do one of those things, and if you're half decent, you get asked back. And because in the Northeast, there really weren't that many women putting themselves forward for all these many public debates, because if you knew anything about the independence referendum, it really captured everyone's imagination. So there was a really old style kind of like public meeting type culture just sprung up. So I found myself out and about many times every week debating against the other side or representing Women for Independence. And I got some fellow travellers along the way, and we had our own quite substantial group in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, and we would have lots of events that we would start to run as well. And it wasn't just women that came along to our meetings, but it was mostly women. And off the back of that, I suppose found my voice and my confidence. I was a lecturer in further education, so I was used to speaking to people, but I was used to, I was used to being the boss. I was used to being in charge of my students. But being in an arena where you're having to persuade people about your political ideals against actually very often very seasoned politicians is very daunting. So I guess that being in this largely women-only space for a lot of time through Women for Independence, but also representing women on events that were largely male-orientated, gave me the confidence. And I very quickly became more and more confident about speaking in public, putting forward my argument, and of course getting a lot of feedback from people that the women's voices in this whole campaign were really important. So what happened was, of course, the referendum happened. Didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but after that, I felt like so many other people, right, that's it. I don't want to go home now. I don't want to go back to just being an armchair, angry person shouting at the television about things and having conversations with people. And just as importantly, a lot of people that I had met through this process started speaking to me and saying, well, we don't want you to go home either. Have you considered standing? And bizarrely, I think that this is a story that I hear about a lot, is that it takes someone else to say to you, hey, have you ever thought about standing for elected office? For you to go, well, no. And then you go away and think of it. You instinctively say, no chance. But then that seeds in your mind and you think, well, if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? If I've done all this, I have things to say, I have things that I think should be happening in politics that are important to me. And if not me, then who? And I think having a life before going into politics is quite important. And that's not to say that the people who have gone from student politics to working from a politician to going straight into politics don't have a place. I mean, these people are you know, they made that decision very early on. But for people who have done lots of other things before, I think there's always that thing in your mind of like, well, I'm not a politician. You know, why would I go into that? But actually, these are the people that actually should think about going into politics, because they have got lots of life experience and they have lots of things to say. But it can be the case that it takes someone else to see that in you before you make that decision. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I think initially I was asked to stand in the general election. I went forward for candidacy. I was not ready at all. I was so naive. I almost kind of felt, well, people are asking me to do it. I should do it, but I don't really want to do it. I'm not ready. So when I didn't get selected, I have to say that I was very, very relieved. Because where I also wanted to be, wasn't Westminster, it was the Scottish Parliament. So I actually worked out fine. So it's almost like I had that test period of going forward for candidacy for the general election, for Westminster election, gave me lots of experience in hustings, debating, campaigning. And then by the time it came for going for candidacy for the Scottish Parliament election, I felt so much more ready and I'd met so many more people. Advice, I've got lots of advice written down on a piece of paper for people. I think that those of you who are thinking about going into politics, well, you've already made the hardest decision because you're thinking about it and you're considering it. And I guess that my message is for the other people who haven't considered elected office yet, but are probably ideal for it. If you've raised a family, if you've worked in a business, if you've run a business, if you've worked in the public sector, if you have been involved in any local campaigns, then you're absolutely the sort of person that should go into politics. Because when you do get into politics, you'll have lots of things to draw on in your experience. And one of the pieces of advice is when you do get into politics, if you do become elected, and this is what I've done, write yourself a list. The minute you get, within 24 hours of being elected, write yourself a list of things that you'd actually like to achieve, the things that you'd like to focus on. Because once you're in there, things can take over the sort of the daily and the weekly, I suppose, treadmill of what you're on. You're so busy, you could lose sight of the things that are important to you. So it's important to have that in my desk in Holyrood. I've got a list, and no one else gets to see that list but me, as a list of things that I must remember to campaign on and to be the things that drive me. And every so often just have a little check, and sometimes you can put a little cross against them that you've managed to do that. One of the things that was important to me was to keep on campaigning about the gender pay gap. And in the economy committee, I basically banged on about it until everyone else decided that it was something that we should do an investigation into, an inquiry into. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I would say that of all the inquiries that we've done since we've been there, the gender pay gap inquiry was the one that caught the attention of the media most and the public most. And I think it has really made a difference to a lot of the other people that are in the economy committee, because in our other inquiries, people that never really had much interest in the gender pay gap are now convinced that it's an issue. So have that list, be determined, don't forget why you got there, but also, I guess, don't rule out politics because you've never been involved in elected politics before. Like me, you've got lots to give. I guess that's my main message, and I'm, really excited to be on the receiving end of some questions that might draw out more about my experience.
Great, thank you, Gillian, for sharing your experience. Without further ado, Rachel Varley was until very recently a Conservative councillor for Bingley Town Council in West Yorkshire. So, Rachel.
Hi, I'm so excited. I've been telling everybody that I know about this for the last few weeks. And I really, like Gillian said, strongly believe in the mission of the Parliament Project, and that's why I'm so excited to be involved. I was listening to what Gillian was saying, and I suppose my stories had some serious similarities, but is also really quite different. I am 22, nearly 22 next week, and I was elected to Bingley Town Council when I was 20. So I haven't been doing this very long. And so I hope I have something to say, but I'm not sure. I definitely don't have as much experience as Gillian in this area at all. But I suppose I'm very different in the respect that I don't look like a Conservative councillor, I suppose. And so I thought I would just start by saying a little bit about me. I am at Edinburgh University and I'm studying history and politics in my final year. So I graduate in a few months, but for the last 2 years, I've been juggling the council and my degree. And I've been travelling and commuting backwards and forwards every 2 weeks because there's a certain number of meetings that you have to attend. And I've tried to get to as many as I can. The council that I joined didn't exist before we were elected to it. So there's 16 councillors. Quite a broad political spread. We had 4 Conservative, 4 Labour, 1 UKIP, 7 independents, I believe. So that was quite interesting to work with lots of different people, and so it was quite difficult, quite challenging for me to sort of be nipping backwards and forwards. It impacted my degree. I felt like I wasn't doing well enough on the council because I couldn't be there all the time, and so it was hard work, but worth doing, and it was definitely one of the best things that I've done, and I would recommend people to do it. So I thought I'd say why and how I became a councillor. And it's not something I'd thought about doing sort of in the immediate future. I wanted to enter politics, and I thought that was something that would happen sort of 10, 20 years, 30 years maybe. It wasn't something I was thinking about doing, especially while I was doing my degree. My family's not political at all. In fact, I think my mother wants me not to be in politics. So I'm not sure. She's worried. She's worried about me being in politics, and so they're definitely not political. And I wasn't political at all until I started doing my A-levels, and I'd studied politics. I just decided to take politics because I thought that looks interesting. I could sort of get on board with that, and loved it. Set up a politics society, and sort of sat down and worked out my political affiliation, and then joined the local association. And from that, I thought there's so many more opportunities from doing that. So that was the key thing to me, was joining the association. And I joined it, and I got, you know, MPs and councillors and things to come and talk to the rest of the school, which was great. And then I came to university, maintained sort of that, it was only a small association, but I maintained my relationship with them, came up here and joined the association at the university, and have been sort of working with them. I was the vice chair for a little bit, and have been doing some sort of Scottish Conservative politics up here, which has been great. I got asked to run as a councillor. I didn't, like Gillian was saying, it was something, somebody came to me. It wasn't something I sought out to do. And it was quite interesting because they didn't ask me directly. They asked my dad, who wasn't Conservative or political. So it was a friend of his who ran the association, and rang him up when we were sat at dinner and said, why don't you join? You know, you've got a lot of free time on your hands. He wasn't working at the time, so why don't you do it? And he said, you know, why the hell are you asking me? Rachel's the one that's interested in this. Ask Rachel to do it. And this guy was like, oh my God, okay. So I then was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And it just sort of jumped at it. And that's how it happened, really. It was very bizarre. But I thought, like Gillian said, if I don't do it, they will handpick the people they want to do it. And so I wanted to sort of be the difference, and I'm glad that I did it. But what I would say was, I had no campaigning experience whatsoever. I didn't know what I was doing. It was good to have the association behind me, because they have, paid campaign managers and people whose job it is to get us elected and keep us elected. So, they produce the leaflets, they sort the campaigning out, and you just, do it. So that was great, because I wouldn't have been able to do that as an independent myself, because I didn't have, the level of, people didn't know me quite as well where I was from, in comparison to some of the people that had set up the council and were trying to get the council to exist. I very recently resigned a few weeks ago. And the reason I resigned was because I had to make a decision. There was quite a few things going on up here, and I wanted to do my degree, and et cetera, et cetera. But I was at odds with the local association. And in the brief that we got sent for this, it talked about integrity. And to me, integrity is what politics is about. And that's the main reason that I resigned. I was being told to vote a certain way, act a certain way, sit in a certain place in meetings. And I went and I tried to resolve this and said, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be told how to do this, And they said, if you can't get behind us and you can't act united. And I said, I can't defend some of the things you're saying. I can't defend what you're trying to do. I believe that my main responsibility, even after being elected, as a Conservative, was still, my loyalty was with my residents, and that was my job to represent my residents, and not do what the small Conservative association in that area wanted me to do. So that's what it came down to in the end. And a better way of drawing attention to that sort of hostility and the issues I was having was to resign rather than to sit there. There was various other issues going on as well, but it became quite clear that I was not doing what they wanted me to do. And that has now forced people to look into that, and people to support me and say, that's not acceptable, you can't do that, we've now lost a councillor because of this. So it's turned out quite well in that respect, and it's made more of a difference, which was what I wanted to begin with. I was going to talk about some of the difficulties that I faced with being so young and on the council. And the sort of benefits, there's two sides to it. There's benefits and there's difficulties with it. I sort of got the criticism that I was the token woman or the token youth that they required. And I had to deal with that. And I've had that all the time. I'm one of very few women in our university association. And quite a few times I've had people say to me, who did you have to get that job? Things like that. So I've had to, all that does is motivate me more. So I keep going. And I joined the council to sort of counter that and to say, Bingley definitely needed somebody to stand up for it, and it needed a council, and residents, needed somebody to defend them. So that was the local side of it. But to me, as well as that, it was sort of the bigger picture. And like Gillian said, if I'm not going to do it, who is going to do it? And that was like my motivation. And constantly I had to keep saying, you have to make allowances for people who are at university or work away, or can't be there and dedicate their entire lives to it, because people have jobs and people have other things to do. And so I said, if you can't make allowances for that, then you're just going to have the same people constantly being in politics, and it's going to be run by the same men, the same retired men, and that's what you're going to have. So I hammered this home all the time, and I did have a lot of support, which was great. But just to touch on the sort of the career politician thing as well, people were saying to me, you're only doing this because you want a career in politics and you think that this is the best place to start. I mean, it is a good place to start. There's no doubt about that. It's brought me some great opportunities. Like, for example, this is a great thing to do. And I'm so pleased that I can do this. But career politician obviously has so many negative connotations. I mean, we wouldn't say the same thing about somebody who wanted to be a teacher or a doctor. You wouldn't say, the experience beforehand is terrible for you. You shouldn't have that experience being a teacher or a doctor. And so I think it's great to be involved in politics because of your experiences and want to have your say and defend people. But at the same time, I don't think that being a politician as a career choice and going down that path means that you're devoid of passion or morality or anything like that. So I had to say that quite a few times when I'd been elected. And I think that's all from me.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. That's brilliant. I want to thank both the speakers. I mean, I will no doubt thank you again probably a number more times, but really for your candour, I guess, from both of you for speaking with us today. I've run quite a few workshops with Parliament Project now, and every time I hear new things that are both inspiring and quite surprising as well from our speakers. That's great. I think I'll just a couple of comments from me. I think there are some definite themes there from both of you around finding a thing that you're passionate about. Really having a desire to debate that is something that you both kind of spoke about as well, which I think is really important. And finding those opportunities that support you to build confidence in your voice and occupy the space. Really interesting debate about life experiences coming in different stripes and at different times that I thought is really interesting there. And kind of how you remain focused and around your integrity. And it is true, we did ask both speakers particularly to think about issues around integrity in politics. And we've got a few questions we'll come back to about that. And 2 points that are really similar for both of you as well. I think we're around this, not having to be from a political background or a political family, or to have been political since, obviously Rachel's experiences are, doing politics and being involved in politics from being at school, but Gillian's are very different, and that not being essential. And I just love that for both of you, if I don't do it, then who will? Which is also another theme we hear a lot of on our sessions. I'm going to go first to a question that we've had from more than one of our participants today. So it definitely comes from both Anya and Helen. They're really interested in But what are both of your experiences of balancing a working political life with family life and a personal life? Now, you both touched on this, but if you, I guess you have any other comments on how you've managed to do that. Rachel, I'm sorry, Gillian actually, because Rachel did just speak. So Gillian, if you want to comment first, and then maybe Rachel.
I'm listening to Rachel and I'm thinking about work-life balance for you. I am absolutely astounded you're a counsellor and a student at the same time, and I just think that's exactly the sort of thing that we should be facilitating. Because Rachel said that, you know, if I don't do it, who will? Just be the same old men doing it who are retired, go into being a counsellor because they've got lots of time in their hands. And that is why meetings last for hours. And that is why meetings last past children's bedtimes. And why people are constantly saying, you know, there's this thing where politicians have to be on call 24/7 and have to be working right throughout the weekend and have to be out every night and whatever. And that is one of the things that puts so many women and a lot of men off from being a politician. It's probably the reason why my mother doesn't want to become a politician, is because you think you'll have no life. But if we don't get more women or carers, and actually it's not just women, but people with caring responsibilities or another strand of their life into politics, so they're actually doing more than just being a politician, then nothing will change. There is no reason in the world why a counsellor has to be working 24/7 and be available and on call, and that's all they do. That is because there's too many people that are doing it for whom it is their, you know, they have nothing else going on. They have no caring responsibilities, whatever. That's one of the reasons why Westminster needs reform. Why are you still debating into the early hours of the morning? It's absolutely ridiculous. At least the Scottish Parliament has got that aspect of things right. It's another reason for getting more people with a lot more going on in their life into politics, because then things start to change because demands will have been made of it. Getting more fathers with caring responsibilities into politics, and you'll soon find that things change. And it's not just people who've got families, it's people like, you know, Rachel has got a life, is trying to get a degree, but was also being a counsellor. That's a brilliant thing. One of our counsellors who just got elected last year, who I really twisted her arm to stand, is doing an Open University degree, and she's got 6 children, and she's a single mum, and she's stupidly bought herself a puppy, but that's another question, that's another thing. But she's doing it, and she makes no apology for the fact that I can't make that meeting, or I have to go after an hour. Can we finish this meeting after an hour? I need to go home and put my kids to bed. Don't apologise for it.
Great. Rachel, would you add anything about how you balanced your, I mean, you talked a bit about university, but any other aspects of balancing your life in that way?
I mean, it's hard work, yeah. It's sort of 4.5 hours for me to get back to Yorkshire from here. I suppose it helps that the degree I'm doing gives me, you know, very few contact hours a week, but that it's all personal study basically. So it meant that I was sort of flexible in that respect. But I would try, because it's a new council, everybody's very enthusiastic. So we had sometimes 3 or 4 meetings a week, and it's just, I don't understand what we have to discuss that we need 3 or 4 meetings a week. But and I was getting a lot of criticism. I was getting criticism from my own party about not being there, which just, you know, shows how they just were unwilling to make these allowances. And I had meetings that were going on for 3 or 4 hours in the evenings, and it was ridiculous, really. But that still hasn't put me off, because, like Gillian was saying, you can't apologise for it. You just have to be like, well, you know, this is the different, you know, we have to do this in order for these changes to happen. Otherwise, we'll just see the same pattern occurring all the time. And so that's just what I did. You know, I'm not there, but I am getting a degree. So
great message, that not apologising. I think that spreads way beyond politics into many other areas of women's lives. Change tack slightly now, in terms of whether either of you have been subject to much online abuse through social media, and how you deal with that, and maybe what support you have. I know this is a frequent question at the sessions that we run in person, concerns about online social abuse. So Rachel, I don't know if you've got any comments, and then Gillian.
So part of my, we sort of took on sort of pet projects or roles specifically on the council. You sat on different committees, and one of the things that I was doing was the social media and communications, marketing, that sort of thing. And so it wasn't, I don't know if it was me specifically, but the council, I would monitor their council page and sort of deal with the backlash that we got from people there. And we had to constantly repeat that we had other things to do, and that we weren't paid to be on the council, so we were just volunteering our time. And this seemed to be something that was just ridiculous for people to understand. So when the grit bins, the people said there weren't enough grit bins and the gritters didn't go out, we had people saying, oh, I bet, Councillor Barley's drive has been gritted, and I bet Council so-and-so's drive has been gritted. And I'm talking hundreds of comments a day about things, and you have to read them all and try and respond or give a statement, and it gets you down. And to watch like certain people, there's always somebody or a few people that decide to comment all the time on everything, and you have to just have a thick skin about that. It's a nightmare. Social media is a nightmare in that respect. Great for other things. Oh, I don't think you're mute. Oh.
Yeah, Gillian, sorry. Anything to add from your experiences around social media?
Yeah, my advice to everyone is, particularly Twitter, the mute button is your friend, and you get to a point where all these people who are saying horrible things to you, you don't see them anymore, and that's the best possible thing. I live, in a lovely bubble where all these horrible people who, every time I go on television, like to talk about my looks, what I'm wearing, horrible things, and make me say horrible, kind of nasty sexual things, whatever. They can just be screaming into the void for all I care, because I muted them years ago. So yeah, they don't know that yet. On Facebook, of course, and things like that, it's more difficult to know that people are going on your page and saying things. I've had some abuse that's actually been serious enough to actually call the police in. And the problem is that, and this is where I'm really going to be quite brutal here, but the people who run these social media platforms do not take enough responsibility for this. What the police have to go through in order to get the IP addresses of people is absolutely ridiculous. Costs so much money, so many man hours, and then you have, like, particularly Twitter will not divulge the IP address of the person who's been harassing you for a year, 18 months, and so it's almost going to get to the point where you think, well, people are just going to get away with it. So really the best way to deal with it is just to try and mute people as much as possible. And I don't know, that people will never usually see these things to your face, but they'll do it behind a keyboard. They're just really quite pathetic individuals. You can't take it personally, but it is hard, because it's particularly when you're new, you do take it personally, and it makes you think sometimes, oh, I'm not going to go on television because it's just going to be an avalanche of nonsense. But you just have to not rise to the bait, and just as soon as you see anything like that coming up in your feed, you just have to just roll past it. I'm in a good position because I have staff. Now, when you're a counsellor like Rachel was, you have to deal with everything yourself. There is a folder in my email account that is marked abuse, and I never go into it because my staff just put stuff into it. Great. I don't have to see it. So I'm in a good position, and I understand that.
Just coming back on what you, just coming back on what you said about the hours earlier, that's, social media doesn't have, open hours. It's always open. It doesn't have closing hours. It's just on all the time. And So, and also because you're supposed to, you have to be open to the public, and you have to be transparent and available. So, you know, your email address, your mobile number, everything, well, for me anyway, was out there, especially your email address. And so even when you're doing council work, you are still getting, like, even out of hours, you're still getting, you know, phone calls and messages and social media stuff, and it's just all the time. And that's one of the biggest problems for me, because I couldn't go, okay, 9 to 5, this is what I'm going to do. I had, you know, it was constantly on all the time. So your mind is just constantly thinking about you know, how am I going to respond to that, or what am I going to say about this? And that was one of the biggest problems for me anyway, that really shocked me. I don't know, for some reason I thought I could do a 9 to 5 thing, apparently not.
No, that is great. I think both those questions and your responses have really complemented each other about us trying to put boundaries around what we can and can't do. But in a world where the reality's really changed with that social media being 24/7, I think we've got time for one last question, and I'm going to kind of combine that with a summing up from Rachel and Gillian, if we can. So I'm sorry that we haven't got time to ask everyone's questions. I'm aware there have been some questions about the kind of support that people have around them. I think both of our guests have touched on some of the key people that have been around them in their experiences. So I think I am going to end on the question you have both slightly touched on, but I think really plays to the theme around my mission for this workshop, which is, how easy is it to avoid getting distracted or worn out by the politics of politics? So just a minute or so from each of you on that would be great. Gillian, do you want to?
Not easy. It's not easy, and I'm the worst person for not being able to switch off. But it's really, really important to find a way to switch off. This is something that we talk about all the time with my colleagues in the Parliament. Oh, we've got quite a lot of new women got elected in the SNP this year, and we talk about this constantly. The way that you unwind is you find people that you can just be completely and utterly honest with and let off steam with. And whether that's your family, whether you've got a group of friends, me and about 3 or 4 MSPs that I trust and I know, we always find time to go for dinner once a week and just go, bleh, and it's the best therapy ever. If you don't have those people around you, you should find some. But that's the only way. They understand what you're going through, and you're in a safe space.
Great. Rachel, have you anything to add about?
No, I'd say the same thing. You've got to have sort of a release valve. You've got to have people, and it's great to have people that sort of understand. So I had quite a few friends on the council that I would discuss this with, and some of my friends who are similar ages to me are councillors elsewhere, and you know, I'd do that. But it's almost, I find it really great to have friends that have no idea what it's like to do this. And they sort of just sit there, and they know when I'm going to like rant at them, because they just sit there and they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And it's great to just get that out to them. And it's great of them to sit there, because I could talk all day. So it's great to have somebody that just sits and listens, and who doesn't come back and say, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. And they just sit there and go, yeah, that's dreadful. And then you can move on.
Great. Thank you both, Rachel and Gillian. That's been a real pleasure. It's really informative and great to hear from you on our first webinar. I think if I had to sum up, I'll challenge myself to sum up really briefly as well. I mean, there's lots of information there, but I think the staying focused by writing a list of the things that we really want to make change to, I think that's a great piece of advice, and I haven't heard that quite so succinctly before. And then I guess from both of you, just still that theme of having those people who are just there for you, and that, you know, will listen to you and you can talk to you. And I don't know, I mean, Gillian, you said you keep that list yourself, but I'm wondering if maybe some of them could have that list and kind of be kind of a little accountable.
I'll maybe divulge it once I've achieved everything on it. How about that?
That could be the other way. No, great, thanks, Moz. I'm just going to talk through a few things that are coming up for the Parliament project before we close today. So all of our event details are available on our website, which is parliamentproject.co.uk. And obviously you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm looking forward to some catching up on maybe what chat was happening on Twitter while we were here or will happen afterwards. The next webinar in this series is focused on where and when to run. That's on the 2nd of March, and our speakers will include Donna Jones, who's the leader at Portsmouth City Council. So it'd be great if you want to join us for that. And before that, if you are in Scotland, we are running a workshop, face-to-face workshop in Aberdeen on the 20th of February. So that's for anybody who can get to that. For those of you who are feeling inspired about your journey or want to kind of hasten your journey on how to run and get elected and you haven't yet signed up, there is a peer support program running alongside these webinars. So that's something you sign up for. It's 6 sessions. We're using coaching tools and kind of all of the information that we've gathered through running these workshops to really help women, work with other women to kind of get on with your journey and accelerate your progress for your political ambitions. Again, more details on the website. We'd really love to see you there. And that starts on the 8th of February. We did send you out a bit of a survey with the link to today's session. If you haven't completed that, that'd be great for us because it's always great to know who's attending, what your experiences are. And we will send you another link to get some feedback. Again, it's the first time we've done this. I think it's been great, but we really do want to hear what you guys thought. So that's it for today. So a final thank you to our speakers for your time, sharing your experiences so candidly. That's been great to hear that, and it's something that we really is so important to the Parliament project that we're able to do that, help women to share those experiences. And I think we're going to try a little more of a traditional thank you goodbye by unmuting everybody in a second so we can all wave, clap, shout thanks, goodbye. Chaos will no doubt ensue. So I'm going to say bye now and thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
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 Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Lovely to see you. Thank you. Good luck. Thanks.